For our next assignment, we're going to be taking essentially the same group of photographs that you took for your first photo assignment, but I want you to apply these 10 things that will make you a better photographer. And if you do these 10 things, I'm pretty sure that you're going to be a better photographer for it. Let's get started. First, I wanted to tell you a little bit about me and my photography. I began taking photographs when I was in college. My father was a photographer, and it just seemed sort of interesting to me. I do have a master's degree in instructional media and instructional technology, and when I was in that program, I did a whole lot of photography. Particularly in those days, it was 35 millimeter film photography because it was pre-digital. I was a media specialist in higher education for many years, and as I mentioned, I started using film, not digital. The digital world just makes things easier, frankly, and it's a lot less expensive as well. Now, I've talked to you a little bit about Flickr, and we've used Flickr. I did want to point out that I've been on Flickr for 9 years now, and I now have about almost 28,000 images on my Flickr account. I think in terms of sheer volume, I've had quite a few opportunities to take photographs, and you can look at all 28,000 of them if you'd want, but there wouldn't be a whole lot of time left over for you to take photographs, and that's really what we want you to do. Let's go ahead. What are we going to do? Number one, and this is very simple, a lot of times people will have essentially a vertically aligned subject. In other words, this guy here is the main subject, and it's really going to be a better photograph if you rotate your camera 90 degrees and create a vertical composition instead of the landscape. So when you do that, you wind up with this photograph, which is inherently much more interesting, and it fills the frame a whole lot better. Filling the frame is going to come up here as another one of these top 10 things. All right. Do you want it to be a horizontal or do you want it to be a vertical? You know, to be honest, a lot of times I will shoot both a horizontal and a vertical. Well, why not? Digital photography, you can do as many photographs as you wish, and that's really very important to do. So in some situations, you're going to make an interesting photograph in the landscape, or you're going to make an interesting vertical. So this is the same subject area, but it makes two different photographs. Why not take both? Now, this is very important. Most of the time when you see a typical snapshot, people haven't gotten close enough to the subject. By standing too far away, your subject is diminished, and the impact of the subject on your photograph is lost. So you want to make the subject dominant. Get in close. If you are in close, it is inherently much more interesting. Now, this is my dog, Flynn Rider the Corgi, and as you can tell, he was pretty much a cute puppy. But it is important that you fill the frame, and we'll talk about that too. Composition is looking through your camera and seeing what's out there. The real trick to being a good photographer is to be able to see the photograph before you take it. You shouldn't just be firing away and then be surprised. You should be composing your photograph. So here's one of the main composition rules, and it's called the rule of thirds. To use the rule of thirds, you don't necessarily want to put your subject in the dead center of your image. If you're really fully filling the frame, you can get away with that. But if you're not, you would want to use this rule of thirds, and I'll explain it just a little bit more. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide your image area into thirds, horizontally and vertically. And then you're going to place your subject close to the intersection of those lines. Some cameras actually have the grid built in, and if you're just starting out and your camera has this feature, I recommend using it because it'll help you avoid the centering phenomenon. Centering can work, but a lot of times your photos are going to be much more interesting if you're using this rule of thirds. So here's a frame. This is a landscape frame. And as you can see, we've got the images, the lines rather, that are going horizontally and vertically. And so where you want to put your focus of your subject is oftentimes in the intersection of those lines. We have this photograph where the sailing boat is right in the center, and we have this one where it's over on the right third, and we have this one that's over on the left third. Now, why is the one that you're just looking at now, this third one, the most interesting? Well, it's not centered, and the second one up here is interesting, but the ship, the boat here, is going in this direction. There's not enough space out here, so it looks kind of weird. This is a good composition because not only is it following this thirds thing, but it also gives this space out here, so it looks like the sailing boat has plenty of room to go in this direction. So that's the final photograph. And by imposing these ruling lines over it, you can see that we are pretty much in this quadrant down here. When you have a horizon, like this line here that separates the water and the land, that's the dominant thing. If you put that close to this third down here, it's more interesting. Suggestion number 4, and this is so simple. Take lots and lots of photographs of the same thing. You can go through and you can pick out the one that will be the one that you're going to keep, the one you really like. With digital photography, there's no reason to just take 1 or 2 shots, unless you have to be in that situation where it's like an action thing. You may only get 1 or 2 shots. But if you're taking a landscape, or if you're taking a portrait, or if you're taking a close-up, get more shots. When you have people in the photo, even if they're essentially in the same pose, take several photographs. There are little differences. For example, a lot of times people will blink. If you've got 5 people in a group photo, it's sort of difficult not to have somebody blinking. So you're going to take several photographs and make sure that you've got one that works. People's smiles change. They might be looking a little goofy. So just take plenty of them. We talk in photography about capturing the moment. And capturing the moment is one of the things. It's kind of difficult to do because you may not have control over the environment. You may not have control over the subject. The best thing to do is just simply to take several photographs. So let's look, for example, here is, this is actually a Sneed State graduation from a couple of years ago. This gentleman was the graduation speaker. I took several photos here. And they're actually all pretty good, but this one that's down on the bottom, which I think that's just really kind of a neat photo because he looks just so joyous. And I think that's a good example of capturing the moment. As you can see, this isn't a bad photo here. This isn't a bad photo here. Now, what I did do was I cropped it. And this is a photo editing thing, which means getting rid of some stuff you don't want. So I turn this horizontal photograph into this more vertical photograph. As you can see, this gentleman is the subject. Now, he really doesn't know that I'm taking his photograph. So it is a candid photograph as opposed to being a portrait. Now, here's another photograph I took in Chattanooga. And I just think this is really kind of delightful because you can see that these people are greeting each other, and that was a special moment. So I think that's a good photograph because it does capture the moment. Now, I took several others that didn't work quite as well as this one. Okay, number 5, and this is really important. Move around. If you have the ability to get in closer, move to the side, try some different things. Do not stay in the same place. Quite honestly, a lot of the students that take this class, it seems to me that they literally take a great deal of the photographs from their front porch. They just kind of stand there and fire away at whatever's in the yard. It's really going to be a whole lot better for you as a photographer if you get out there and move around. Get into the yard, get close to your subjects, take some from one angle, take some from another angle. If you're just getting the same background even, it may be boring. So here is this ship. In order to get this particular detail on it, I had to actually walk from where I took this photograph all the way over to the other side over here, take this photograph, and then also I took this one. Now notice I made this one a vertical. If you've got tall things like these masts, it's better to make it a vertical. Be careful about your backgrounds. One thing that you really don't want are telephone poles or trees growing out of the subject's head. A neutral and uncluttered background will make your subject kind of pop. In other words, it really stands out. Now, as you get to be able to use your camera in a more sophisticated way and can take advantage of some of the settings on it, particularly if you have the single lens reflex camera, you can discover that there's ways to make the background blurry or out of focus. In this photograph, for example, we have a great blue heron, and the background on it, because it was taken, and here's part of the trick really, is if you zoom in. When you zoom in on your subject, it will make the background go out of focus. Number 7, hold your camera very steady. Many times the camera that is shaking or moving a little bit gives your image the appearance that it's not really in focus. It may actually be in focus, but if you're moving your camera, then you're going to have a blurry image. So hold your camera steady. There's actually some techniques that we can cover later on about how to hold your camera. When we are doing photographs that have very low light conditions, indoor frequently has low light conditions, it's even more important. Practice slowly pressing your camera shutter button. Press it smoothly, steadily. Don't jerk at it, don't stab at it, because that's going to move your camera. I recommend that everybody that is a serious photographer should probably get a tripod. There's also a thing called a monopod. I just bought one recently. I really like it. And again, we're going to talk more when we get into the camera itself. Then we will talk more about how you can use your camera settings to help with this. Okay, you want to shoot at proper level and angle. So, for example, if you're taking photographs of a pet or a child, then bend down, kneel even, because if you're just pointing down at the child or at the subject, it actually diminishes the stature of what you're taking a photograph of. So you want to get down there and be more level with it. Now, shooting up, for example, with a ship here, it actually creates a sense of enhancing the vertical nature of this particular photograph. So shooting up makes things look more significant. Pointing the camera down at them diminishes the subject. Some of you may recognize Dr. Watts here in his Religions of the World class, where he puts on the costumes that are associated with religions. I really like this photograph in part because I am at his eye level when I take it. It also has interesting composition. Let's go back to that rule of thirds thing. Okay, so here's a third, approximately a third this way, and here's a third this way. Dr. Watt's face is what you really want to have your eye look at. Now, we're also going to talk about composition in terms of angles and lines. And so what this particular photograph does that's nice is that it creates this line of his arm going up and this line of this shoulder going up, so that kind of comes to this point also. So again, we're talking about lines, and lines and angles are very powerful visual elements. One of the exercises we're going to do will be to have some very specific instructions so that you will take photographs that are really going to bring out the lines. So this particular ship's pulley and rope system here, but also you've got these interesting lines of the ship structure itself, these beams and the flooring and so forth. So I think that's a pretty interesting photograph because of the lines. Again, the lines that we're seeing here help to make this an interesting photograph. This is close to the rule of thirds here. Not exactly, but it's close. Here's a good trick too. If you use an element of the environment to frame the photo, so here we've got this structure here and here and here that are all kind of framing the subject in here. Similarly, taking a landscape photograph, you can use a tree branch, for example, as a frame. It's almost a cliche, but it's a very effective technique to use. So lines and angles and framing are really important. Again, here's a tree, and it is nicely framing the building back here. Here's another one that has some interesting lines. Here's your rule of thirds kind of horizon line here. And then you've got this sidewalk. Imagine this was a railroad track or even a road. When things go off into the distant back there, this is called the vanishing point back here. So this is an interesting technique. Number 10, and this is critical, learn as much as you can about your camera. Even these point and shoot cameras have a lot of power, and there's a lot of things you can do with them if you know what those settings are about. If you have a single lens reflex camera, there's more complexity, more to learn, but there's also more power. Please be sure, if you don't have the actual manual to your camera, just Google your camera model and put in manual and you'll get them. Typically they can be a PDF file. So that's 10 things that you can learn right from this lesson, and I want you to apply them in the next lesson.